Welcome to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy is a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL, a former protective officer for the CIA Global Response Staff, founder and CEO of the Able Shepherd Program, a husband and father of 4, and a personal friend of mine. Now here's Jimmy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. I'm your host, Jimmy Graham. In the studio, as usual, BK, how you doing, brother? Doing
awesome.
I'm glad to hear it. And our special guest today, we're very honored to have a friend for quite a while now. We've known each other before you were the sheriff of Douglas County, Darren Wickley. Welcome, friend.
Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Thank you so much. Was sent a podcast recently. You and Steve, is it Peck?
Yes.
Yes, and watched that. Went through that and just had my people reach out to you, and you responded quickly to come and just sit down with us and have a conversation. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Our community, I would say heavily in Douglas County. Some up here a little bit north in Arapahoe, but we'll just jump right in if that's cool. Could you explain kind of for our listeners the role of sheriff, kind of who you answer to, how you get that position, obviously election, and just a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the role of sheriff it's an elected position. We differ from chiefs of police, whereas obviously the sheriff's elected. The sheriff is also in charge of the county jail and civil process. And so I'm statutorily mandated for those things. And then we also cover law enforcement operations in unincorporated areas of the county. And then we also contract with the city of Larkspur, town of Larkspur, and then the city of Castle Pines for law enforcement services as well. And so we have about 400 commissioned staff, another 200 civilians, and about 150 or so volunteers of the sheriff's office. But we're a full service sheriff's office, Triple Crown accredited. It's an amazing agency, and I'm pretty proud to be their sheriff. But yeah, I don't have any bosses other than the people of Douglas County. Those are my bosses. So I don't answer to the commissioners. They do control my budget, to be sure, but I don't report to them. I only report to the people.
Oh, thank God. And thank you, because I live in Douglas County right there at Plum Creek. So 4 kids, and appreciate to know you're a family man. So
I am.
Appreciate you. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Active shootings in schools, obviously on the rise. That's, what this was birthed from my background, having experience, not so much in the SEAL team stuff, but in the CIA, that protector model. It was just an amazing model. So, I felt called to, once you see something that could use some help, meaning especially with the church security stuff, a lot of people, as you know, are kind of winging it. They get a concealed handgun permit, and God bless them doing the best they can, but there's so much to this, right? I felt a responsibility and a calling to say that the people in my community could do it a little bit better. Like I could help them. I feel like I'm thankfully a gifted teacher. I think that's part of my calling, my spiritual gifts, is to add value to others, particularly in protection. So you've seen this. One, in the schools, but 2, we live along I-25, and this movie came out. Are you familiar with it? I think I saw that you posted that you saw The Sound of Freedom.
I did.
A lot of people fired up about that right now. So if we could start with active shooter and kind of talk about our crime situation. Sometimes we get comfortable, in the county, and I know we don't want to talk about, crime when everybody feels safe, but there's a realistic, I think, when I talk to fire and police that are my buddies, they tell me kind of a different story, and it should be kind of looked at.
Well, as the sheriff, I take it very seriously. Although I'm new to being the sheriff, I've been in law enforcement for over 29 years, almost 30 years now, and I've seen a lot of horrific things happen over my career. And the average citizen in our area, they can't even fathom or contemplate the horrors that people can inflict on each other. And as a deputy sheriff and then moving up through the chain of command, I would often work church security details as a secondary assignment, on my days off. And, there's a lot of great people in the church security network. But what I had found over the years is many of these folks didn't have formalized training. There was no policies or procedures in place for the various church groups. And, your organization, and you're not paying me to say this, your organization, I have worked with people that have become Able Shepherd certified and graduated through your program. And all of the individuals that I have come across were extremely professional, extremely knowledgeable. They didn't overreact to situations. they were just very mindful and professional. And so just in my law enforcement interactions with various churches, I had often recommended folks, if they're interested in training their staff, to come to Able Shepherd, because you and your organization, you're the real deal. There's plenty of fly-by-night companies out there and people with some limited experience that are willing to sell that, but you and your staff are the real deal. But back to your question, I think it's critical, whether you're talking, church security groups or what have you, that we have those frontline defenders who are willing to put themselves in harm's way to protect others. And I think it's critical that they need to have the proper skill set, knowledge, and training. It can't just be some guy that was able to get his concealed weapons permit, him or her, their weapons permit. They need to have that formalized, higher level of training, because when and if, and God forbid that that moment of truth comes when you have to act and utilize that training, you need to be able to do it. And so I know your organization gets that done. I also know your organization has a high standard of training, and you just won't let anybody off the street go through your program. They have to meet certain criteria. And I didn't hear this from you. I heard it through other people that have gone through your program. And those standards, it's critical, because you get one bad person through your program that does something stupid, it's going to cause a lot of damage. And so I just appreciate your level of professionalism and what you have brought to our region for training our citizens.
No, I really appreciate that. I think one of my issues in BK, see, BK, no, people don't realize kind of how good they are when you hold them to a standard. You just kind of demand excellence once you've seen it and they perform. But they go, are we any good at this? And I'm like, this is, we say this a lot around here, show me. It's like people are like, where do I start? I was in the Army, such and such. I was in the Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. Where do I start? We say POP. Why? Because if you don't start at the same spot, that's the first class protecting our people. Then they work through a phase schedule, meaning if we say show me and you can't, then it's not safe for you or anybody else to move forward. But once you do, you own it and you pass it, and now it's yours to keep, right? And then you go into dynamic pistol, and then again, show me. Now it's safe for you to move on, so you can perform on any given day. So you know that because you've had a standard, I've had a standard. And once you do that, it becomes a part of a capability. Not a check in the box.
Right.
We do have, transcripts for hours, but we don't train to hours, we train to mastery. If you can't do it, then you don't get a gun and you don't get to stand next to my kids. Period.
No, that's great.
And that was very hard starting a business, but now we've been around long enough and just clawed our way through the years to where now people are like, man, I've been wronged by a minimum wage security guard company enough. Get me that guy's number. And then we do. We made sure it was affordable as best we could for that kind of training. So I really appreciate those words, because the guys that train, the guys and gals that train to defend their families, they're going to appreciate it hearing it from you. So
well, no, absolutely. And people just don't realize, we see it, we easily forget, the church shootings that we've had, in Colorado or throughout the country. Unfortunately, we've had so many mass shooting events where people, it's a 1 week news story and then people forget. But the fact of the matter is horrific things do happen, but when those shots start ringing out, if we have those civilian protectors to protect that flock in that church, I just wish it was something every church was doing.
Yeah, no, thank you. We do the Defend the Flock series, and that's one of I have a great deal of respect for you, because before you were sheriff, this was your thing. And I remember seeing you at those events, and we talked a bit. We didn't go over this extensively about the program, but you talked to other people. And it wasn't like I made sheriff, now I care about it. No. Right? You cared about it a long time ago because you were standing there. I remember seeing you standing there, like at some of those events, and just saying, who's teaching what? And obviously you weren't biased to anybody, but you're like, hey, I know enough to know what I'm looking at.
Absolutely.
And these guys don't really flex on their standards. So.
Well, I was the Douglas County Sheriff SWAT commander. We have a regionalized team. It's made up of officers from Douglas County Sheriff, Cass Rock, Parker, Lone Tree, and I was the team commander for many years. So wherever that team was dispatched, whether it was in one of those municipalities or it was even sent out of the county, the buck stopped with me on all of those missions. So I know what I'm talking about when I talk about these types of the training that's required and the faith that I have in your organization, and just the appreciation that I have for people who are willing to put themselves in harm's way to protect others.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We've talked about, I've said this way many times, is if the problem is people, the solution is always people. It's always people, right?
Yeah.
But people don't want to invest in people because they'd rather buy cameras that document kind of what happened. But the solution is going to be a person on scene, or it's going to be somebody showing up in a SWAT truck, but it is people, right?
Absolutely.
So making sure that they're more effectively at, say, an active shooter in a school. My fear is that something happens, even though it's not very far, it's not close enough, my kid's school, and I'm here working, right? Guys in my peer group of the SEAL teams of GRS or, that level, they're like, you train civilians? And I'm like, I absolutely do.
Yep.
Because that's who's watching my kids. Like at one point, I was deploying 7 months out of the year. Somebody was responding for my family. If it wasn't my police department, it was my neighbors.
Yep.
And if they didn't know how to do it correctly or safely, it's my fault. Because I know, and I've taught people how to do this. So we started teaching people to make a community safer. And I believe it is my job to educate my kids. It's my job to protect my kids, right? As an American free on this earth, and we pay tax dollars so that professionals can watch over my children while I'm up here, right? So I'm not in Douglas County right now, and I'm trusting your people to do it, right? So we're on the same team.
And we do it well. I promise you that.
Yeah, I know, and I know it. It's and having worked with the SWAT team and some of the guys, for years now, even if it was just a volunteer thing or if I was doing a joint thing over the mountain ridge or something like that, I do believe that everybody says they have the best guys, but I am very comfortable with the SWAT team in Douglas County and all that. So I'm not
we do a great job, and we have the highest standards. We're utilized throughout Colorado by other agencies as well. When they need a team, they call us because we're very professional. We train our staff well. They have the best equipment to do their jobs. And when you need SWAT to respond, you don't want somebody that does this once in a while. You want a team that's proficient at it and knows what they're doing and is well equipped.
How about the patrol guy? I don't know if you call it patrol when it's a deputy.
Yeah, just a standard patrol deputy. Yep.
And the same thing with Castle Rock for Chief Colley's guys and all that stuff, because the numbers say most likely they're going to be the people. Are they getting adequate active shooter training?
They are. We mandate it every year. When I was the sheriff, I ordered that we have a large-scale training exercise. We incorporate fire as well, but we train with the police departments because if something were to happen anywhere in Douglas County in any jurisdiction, we're all coming. And so we need to ensure that we train together. We know what we're doing. We're training with fire. We're communicating. As you know, that's one of the most critical elements of any operation is to be able to communicate with each other. You don't want to do that for the first time during a real incident. So I take these things very seriously, and as the sheriff, I think it's my role and my responsibility to ensure that we are training together, and that is in fact happening. Last week, we trained with all of our SROs in all the jurisdictions, and we included fire. We did a full-scale exercise in one of our high schools in Douglas County. So we're well trained and well prepared, and that's we're not finishing with that. We're going to keep doing it every year.
What can we do to make the schools in particular more safe? Where everybody's getting ready for school to kick back off.
Yep.
Typically, and I'm not picking on schools, but summer kicks in, everybody's going to do a thing, everybody goes on vacation, and about now our phone starts ringing, and they're like, hey, we need it yesterday, and it's like, hey, there's no more spots on the calendar, but what can we do to make the schools more safe? I know sometimes there's a roving patrol to where we're kind of just, putting somebody out there so they can, so the bad guys, I guess, can't guess where they're going to be, which means that some of those schools aren't protected throughout the day.
Yeah, we have one of the most robust school resource officer programs in the entire state of Colorado. Unlike Denver and other areas that have kind of rejected their SRO programs, so they realize they made a mistake and they're bringing them back. We have one of the most robust in Douglas County. We do have SROs at every high school and every middle school that's run by the Douglas County School District. The elementary schools, we do have roves that come at different times of day at different schools. So a bad guy, if they were to track when and where we will be, they will not know exactly. But we do the best that we can with the resources that we're given. But it's my goal to have a school resource officer in every school. And I've already been in communication with the school district to hopefully move toward that goal eventually.
Is that public schools, private schools, charter schools?
It's some. It's all public schools in terms of the high schools and middle schools. Charter schools, we have various contracts with various charter schools, and we split those costs for the SROs. And so, but no, we don't have every charter school covered or every private school.
Okay. I know a lot of schools are contacting us, especially the faith-based There's attacks right now, as you know, that are being targeted towards, religiousness, whether it's a Catholic school, whether it's a Christian school, and all that. So they are taking measures. I think, I know we've talked about this because I've briefed you on this. The defend modules, as opposed to run, hide, fight, was a good start.
Right.
It doesn't cover medical and all that. So we say defense, evacuate, fortify, emergency medical aid, notify others in your immediate area, and then dial 911. And they're not in order, right? Because you don't get to pick your emergency, right? It's having 6 tools to be successful and then be able to enact the one that's going to save you and some kids.
Yeah.
So I know that there are a lot of people that are considering that, and sometimes they appreciate their discretion, but an armed, we call it an immediate responder, right? First responder was taken, so we say that immediate responder, who's there? For example, we just started a school, or they started a school here north of us here, and one of the able shepherds got hired on. He's a teacher. He's like 6'6". He's like a vet, and he's just a stellar guy and a good model of strength. And they picked him up like that because everybody's thinking safety.
No, and that's great. I mean, I have long been, and on the campaign trail, I've reiterated this. I support, armed school staff. Obviously, John and Maria Castillo,
yes.
Kendrick. If we'd only had an armed staff member inside that school to protect those kids. Again, I told you that we have one of the most robust school resource officer programs in the entire state. It still didn't save Kendrick.
Yeah.
We got in that building within a matter of minutes, and we got our suspects in custody. Kendrick's still not with us.
Right.
If we had an armed staff member inside that school, things could have gone down a lot differently. Mm-hmm. Nashville, I'm sure you've studied that. Mm-hmm. That shooter intentionally targeted that school because it was a soft target.
Right.
That shooter knew that they had some time before somebody started shooting back at them. Over the years, shooting after shooting, incident after incident, many schools have failed to learn from those. And I brought this up on the interview I did with Steve Peck. There's something that people have about having firearms in school, and I get it, but if it's a properly trained staff member in that school that knows what they're doing to protect those kids, why wouldn't you do that? Right. Instead of these teachers being human shields protecting those kids. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, how can you expect for a teacher to take on one more burden? Or how can you expect that teacher to be able to shoot another kid? Well, how can you expect a teacher to be in a room by themselves with a room full of kids and watch those kids getting shot?
That's
They're
right.
not going to do that.
That's right.
They're going to do everything they can to defend those children. And it's a subject that brings up a lot of controversy. But if you go to the shopping mall and you see a 21-year-old security guard who may have just picked up a gun and learned to qualify with it or whatever their requirements are, and that was their only level of training, but you're good with that. Yeah. But somebody with a higher level of training that could actually defend your kids, you're not good with. And I just don't understand the logic.
Yeah. We're absolutely on the same side of that. Is you can't claim that our teachers are incapable of learning, and if they are, they shouldn't be teachers. And I'm not saying that they should pick up a gun, and neither are you. You shouldn't force them.
No,
you can't force them because it's the wrong person, right?
Right.
But to say they can't learn, we say that, again, we can say this a lot. Show me. Some of those people want, and there should be some kind of compensation. But when I drop my kids off in the morning, they're alive.
Yep.
And I expect to get them back in the same condition, right? So to the best of your ability. And some of those people, if they would take on that, and this is what we do. I mean, people say that can't work. I'm like, we do it all the time. Don't tell me, that's very annoying saying it can't be done to the people that are doing it every day, right? So if it's, like you said, a security guard, very little training, and you want that person in there, you're just getting a different person in there, and now they're failing left and right. We're seeing this all over, whether it's church or a paid security guard volunteer, because they didn't start with character. And now I'm going to go probably into an area that I don't know if you're comfortable talking about or not, but when I'm talking about faith, there's a lot of prepper, there's a lot of, we're going to Mike Glover and talking about Fieldcraft. I'm going to talk to him about this, is I don't understand that prepper, get prepared and live longer than anybody because you got more beans and bullets and then go to hell, right? So when I talk about character, I mean a solid foundation in their faith. Is it a person? The interview started 3 years ago. I know this person. I trust them. I believe they'd die for my kids. Now consider a security position. Now consider that teacher. When they ask, how do I pick my person? I go, I think you already know. Let's have a conversation. They got that person that's kind of a, look at me, I got all these guns, but you feel like he'd be hiding under the table. But then you got this woman like we saw in Nashville that's exposing herself to give critical information to get somebody in there so kids can get help. Man, she's awesome. She's one of my new heroes, right? So starting with character and then giving them the skills. I don't want you to die for my kids. I want you to live for them.
Absolutely.
Right? So we'll give them those tools to be successful.
Yep.
I'll go down here because I know there's been questions for us, Uvalde, and I don't want to put you in a position where you're talking about fellow law enforcement and all that kind of stuff, but we studied Uvalde and next to, on a podcast, Uvalde versus Nashville. So we didn't plan on this, but I already had a trip to Texas, and it wasn't very far away from Uvalde. And then Uvalde happened. I spoke on C-SPAN at the Western Conservative Summit regarding this and the future of how schools are being built. And Uvalde happened, so I last minute changed my notes and talked about that. I was going to talk about leadership and all this other stuff, and it real quickly switched to future of safe schools. Uvalde had put out some of the representatives that they needed help, new, fresh ideas. So we scheduled an appointment, went down there and met with some of those officers, and obviously it was just dark. It was just a dark, dark thing.
Right.
And they look up and they said, "We weren't trained for this." And I said, "I know. I wasn't being a jerk."
No.
And I said, "I know. I saw the video." What we analyzed, what we kind of came to was when you look at those two side by side, we call it feed the front. Like if I said, let's talk about Tennessee for a second. When we call him Officer Rex. Officer Rex says, "I need 3, let's go," and then takes a step. That step says way more. It says, I'm going, this is the definition for me, for Shepherd, I'm going to go and you're invited. Can't make you do anything. I'm going to go and you're invited. And that bestows courage. That gives birth to courage. What they did there is they went and there was a fast response, under 3 minutes. But they peaked, got shot at, and then they left. They didn't come back for 74 more minutes. That's not good, right? But then it turned into what we call feed the rear. There's danger and you should go. And then the guy goes, "Well, why aren't you going? Why aren't you going?" And they start finding other reasons not to go. So that feed the front mentality of I'm going to go and you're invited is kind of what we're missing, that we could call grit.
Right.
So that's the thing that I believe that we're lacking in some cases in this country, not Douglas County, in this country.
Right.
Any comments on that or any thing to say about that?
You met those guys and that's a horrible situation, but I couldn't live with myself.
Oh, man.
If something like that was going on, and I couldn't live with myself that I didn't do anything.
Right.
And so, that's a failure of leadership. As the sheriff, I am responsible for training my staff appropriately. That means I have to be forward thinking. And I agree. I don't think that they were prepared to go into what they did. And I know, and the chief, he's no longer, with that organization. He was like, "Oh, well, none of my officers were hurt or anything like that." Okay, I get that. I don't want any of my people hurt either. But here's the fact of the matter. You raised your right hand and you swore an oath to serve and protect your community. Those parents sent those kids to school that day with the expectation that their local law enforcement, if something bad were to happen, and in this case, the most horrific thing happened, and you stood at the end of the hall, again, I couldn't live with myself. Yeah. I would have to be dead before I stopped. And, I know that the way that my people train, if we identify a coward, and we have not identified a coward in my organization, they wouldn't make it. We intentionally put them in situations that are high stress. So those situations where we have active killer training, and that's what we call them. And it's not an active shooter, it's an active killer. Yeah. For every second you're waiting, people are dying. And for every second that you're not going down that hallway, I don't care if you're being shot at or not. That's why we gave you the equipment to do that job, and that's why we train you appropriately. But again, they weren't properly trained, but I know you're the same way. You would have to kill me to stop me from getting in that room.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that we point out in that video is, look, it's the best gear money can buy. They got the shields, they've got the guns, they've got all this stuff, and there's just one piece missing, and it's a capability. Like somebody needs to go, and then that will start a thing. And it did. 77 minutes in, that last 30 seconds could have been the first 30. It just wasn't, and that's unfortunate.
And you know this. I mean, the longer and the more time you give them to fortify, the harder it's going to be. You cannot wait.
Yeah, amen. I'm going to jump right into red flag. Okay. I know that we talked about this before you ran. We had a serious conversation about it. I stand on one side of it, and I'm learning more, so I just want to open that door because I've had people question. I did call some people, "Hey, what should I ask Darren?" All that kind of stuff. Can you explain your perspective and your stance on what they call red flag and where that kind of tension is?
Sure. So red flag is a court order, essentially, that we could go to a judge, similar to an arrest warrant or a search warrant, and be able to confiscate somebody's firearms. The emergency order is good for 14 days, and then you can go and seek a permanent order. I think the law is well-meaning. What people worry about is, and this is what I went through when I was campaigning, like, okay, well, Darren, we trust you, but what about the next person that takes your place? A lot of people don't realize this is not just a sheriff issue, police departments as well. And so that it's critical that you have a police chief, ask them what their stance is on this. A lot of this was focused on the sheriff, but it's police chiefs also. We have done 4 red flag orders, 4, since that law was enacted. The 4 that we have done them on, if the most staunch Second Amendment supporter were to read the affidavits in these cases, they would say that person should not have a firearm. These are people with extreme mental illness that have shown that they intend to kill people, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's a private citizen. The threshold that we have to have is, again, it's a high threshold. We need corroborating evidence that we have to present to a judge and say, Judge, this is why we need this order. A lot of people are concerned about he said, she said. So, hey, a couple's going through divorce, and then one couple, the wife is saying, hey, I think my husband's got guns. I think he's dangerous. He's going to kill people. That's not how this is done. I will never take firearms from law-abiding citizens of sound mind, period. I'm not just a Second Amendment supporter, I'm a Second Amendment defender. I was down at the Capitol this year defending our Second Amendment rights against the assault weapons ban and also the expansion of red flag. That expanded to having healthcare providers, mental health professionals. They can directly petition for a red flag now. Now, it still has to go in front of a judge for the judge to approve it. But nevertheless, it got easier for somebody to potentially have a red flag order approved by a judge. But what I often tell people is, I want you to imagine the person that is closest to you in your life, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your child, whoever's nearest and dearest to your heart. Now, imagine that person was killed in some sort of a mass shooting event. And you later found out that the sheriff of Douglas County knew that individual was dangerous, knew that they had a weapon, intended to use that weapon, were going to kill people, and did absolutely nothing about it. I'm going to do something about it if I have to. The biggest issue that most people have with the red flag is the right to due process. And so my objective is to be able to serve the person with the notification and then serve that way. Now, that increases the danger level. Yeah. For all involved. So right now, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office has no outstanding red flag orders. Those were all done under the previous administration. Again, the ones that were completed, I think those were valid. They really were. But I intend to only move forward on anything like that if I have overwhelming evidence to show that innocent people are going to die. It's my job as the sheriff to protect this community. And I know a lot of people will say different things. Well, I would never do this. I would never do that. Until you're in the position that you have to make that choice and decide whether you're going to roll the dice with somebody else's life. And those are the decisions that I have to live with and make every day. And yes, I'm very qualified to make those decisions. But what I will not allow to have happen is for law-abiding citizens of sound mind to have their weapons taken away based upon allegations. That will not happen on my watch.
So yeah, that's where I have issue with it, is the civil liberties part, and I would never want to. Again, I'm picturing my children, right? And if for me to make decisions, because I know people like this, I just called the DC, Washington, D.C., to talk about options for active shooter in schools, right? And I went through all of my stuff, including my Bible, and their jaws hit the floor, because I was like, if we don't get back to this, then we don't even have a foundation to build on, right? Because like right now, the truth will set us free, right? And they were like, you're not welcome back. But what's heard can't be unheard, right? So that's exactly was my position, was talking about we can build schools, and we can do this, we can do defend modules, and we can train law enforcement, we can have armed teachers. But if we don't get back to the truth, we don't stand a chance, right?
Right.
So fighting for freedoms, like I want freedom of this, freedom of that. It's like, no, fight for the truth because the truth will set us free. But if we have freedoms and we start pulling the truth, we're slaves, and that's where we're heading. So that the part that I have an issue with is the civil liberties part. I would not want somebody to ask me while I'm emotional and I lost a child, what's good long term? Because I think we're always looking at, right now the world is saying, look, short term, not long term, meaning civil liberties. So is the juice worth the squeeze, in your opinion?
Well, when I was down testifying against the assault weapons ban, I said we cannot continue to take people's civil liberties away, their rights away under the guise of safety.
That's right.
Because very slowly and methodically, those rights are being taken away. Do I want people to die? Absolutely not. I would defend my life. I would give my life to defend innocent people. But we need to be very cautious and very careful how we're doing this. And a lot of people don't seem to be concerned about giving up their rights under the guise of safety, which is concerning. And I'm sure last year wasn't the last. They're going to go back, and I guarantee you they're going to go. There'll be more gun bills next year, guaranteed. And so we just need to be mindful of that and vote accordingly. We really do. You would think after the COVID lockdowns and everything else that happened in this country that 10 years ago, I think none of us would have believed ever could have happened in the United States of America, but yet here we are. A lot of people willingly gave up their civil liberties very quickly. And what's funny is where's the ACLU on all of this?
Right.
Silent. But when I was running the jail, which I was during the COVID lockdowns, the ACLU was calling me every week, and their objective was to get people out of jail. So take that for what it's worth. But we do need to be very vigilant and guard our right as citizens in this
accountability.
This country.
Dictates that I say this. We the people starts with be the person. It's
Absolutely.
me first and my home, then outboard, then we elect representatives. We elect our sheriffs that are in line with our a vision of a healthy future. Because what I'm seeing right now creeping in is not sustainable. Like the stuff going on in our county that's creeping in, and I understand that you are there to enforce laws, but I see a thing coming for our children that I'm not okay with, right? So, and I know it's my job to stand and support our local law enforcement, and you're going to want it. If it gets that bad, you're going to want people. You're going to need, people. And they should be people of character that have some level of training, right? Standing to support. You see on a small scale, not small scale, individual scales where officers get, in a pickle, and then citizens come to help them. It should be that. It must be that, right?
Oh yeah.
How many officers?
About 400.
About 400. Yeah. Okay. For 80,000, 70.
200.
No, I'm sorry, because it's not just Castle Rock. We're talking.
No, 230,000.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So the math doesn't add up if it gets real bad, right? So it's all of a sudden we're on the same team again because it must be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So my guys and myself, very practical question. So Jimmy Graham, law-abiding citizen, Christian man, father, very involved in my school, very involved in my church. Me following the law, I have nothing to worry about with my guns with my local sheriff if I'm following the law.
Correct. unless you lose your mind and you want to go shoot innocent people.
Correct.
Which would never happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, absolutely.
Right. And that's because, when we talk about that, it is our job. It's something that I can't delegate to you, is to go protect my kids. You're like, I got a lot of stuff going on. Now, I can if that's all I've got going on, right? But if it gets bad, I think people are being reminded, it's always been my job to protect my kids.
Absolutely.
Right? Ultimately, right? And you're going to, within your resources, like we talk about in the schools, the big ones should protect the little ones to the best of their ability. It's, I'm a teacher. It's not my job to protect kids. It's every adult's job to protect kids.
Absolutely.
And then if it gets out of hand, there's going to, with a response, there's going to be people that come help you out with handcuffs and guns, and they're going to finish the job. Or start it if you've got nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yep.
Anything else? Our community. It's just people that have committed to protect their local community. Say those in their care. Our motto is take care of one another. Anything that you want to say to your constituents, your people in Douglas County, or up here in where are we at? Arapahoe County. I want to add one more thing. Yeah. Talked to then Sheriff Walter when he was right down the street here, and we had kind of talked about this a little bit, and was talking about, I want to create a thing, this was many years ago, where people are taking an active role, protecting their schools and their homes and their churches and all that stuff. And I didn't mean to be short with him, but he was like, I guess I'd be okay. And I said, sorry, Sheriff, I wasn't asking. And he was like, oh, like this guy knows his rights. And we had a very productive conversation about reserves and all that stuff. Is there anything like that? And I'm not asking to, be considered, is Is there like a community or a reserve unit in Douglas County? Because I honestly don't know.
Yeah, there is. We have a reserve deputy sheriff. So you have to go through a Colorado Post Academy, graduate from that academy, and then we will bring you on as a reserve. They're typically people that have regular daytime jobs. They want to serve and protect their community, and so they go through the academy, and then we'll bring them on and hire them on as reserves. And there's many law enforcement agencies, both sheriff's offices and police departments, that have those similar programs.
So some of our folks that are maybe interested in that, it's a reserve. You said hired on. Is it a paid thing? Is it a volunteer
No, it's
thing?
completely volunteer.
Okay.
After you go through the academy and you're all certified and go through all of our processes, you're allowed to work like off-duty jobs at churches and things like that, where you are paid through the Deputy Sheriff's Association. So yeah, you can make money that way, but the only way that you can get to that level is to go through the academy, go through the field training program, and then work the street on a regular basis.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've had some folks do that in Arapahoe. I don't know that we have in Douglas, but I'm sure there's people that are interested. So
yeah, we have a small program now, but I want to build it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you the final word. Like I said, to the Able Shepherd community, anybody listening, we have listeners all over the country. So I'll give you the final word.
I just appreciate all of you. I appreciate you going through the Able Shepherd training and serving and protecting our community. And as the sheriff of Douglas County, just know how much I appreciate you and the work that you do to protect our citizens. So thank you.
Awesome, sir. Thank you very much. As a man of faith that I understand, and
Yes.
a man that doesn't hide your political affiliation. Sorry, I gave you the last word, but I got something more to say.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, because I know a lot of people that are in line for like chief of police, sheriff's department, or chief of fire that say, I'm not going to say which way. They won't expose their affiliation so that they can make sheriff or chief or something. In my opinion, that's the exact reason why they shouldn't be. And I know you're not that guy.
I am not that guy. I am a Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy. I am a proud Republican. Have been my entire life. I couldn't wait to register as a Republican on my 18th birthday. I'm a conservative, and I believe in our country. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in patriotism, and I believe we need to save our country.
Amen. I appreciate it. That's a great final word.
Thank you,
sir.
man.
I appreciate it. All right, guys. Douglas County, Colorado Sheriff Darren Weekly, thank you so much for being here. This one's in the books, guys. So until we see you again, God bless each and every one of you. Take care of one another.